Hi guys, welcome. Today, we're diving into the 2007 film The Mist. At the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to David, his wife Stephanie, and their 8-year-old son, Billy, who live in a town called Brickton. As a severe storm begins to hit, they decide to move to the basement for safety. The next day, after the storm passes, they find that their house has sustained significant damage. They also notice a large tree from their neighbor Brent's yard has fallen onto their boathouse, leaving Billy quite upset. While assessing the damage, they see a strange, thick mist rolling in across the lake towards their home. Though they find it odd, they don't dwell on it. David visits Brent to discuss the damage and gather insurance details. During their conversation, David learns that Brent's car has also been completely wrecked by the storm. David decides to drive into town with his son Billy to pick up supplies. On their way, they see several military vehicles moving in different directions. After the storm, a large number of people gather at the local supermarket to buy essentials, but since there's no power, all transactions are done manually. Suddenly, military vehicles rush by with sirens blaring. As the townspeople gather to see what's happening, an elderly man stumbles into the supermarket, bleeding from his nose. Panicked, he shouts that there's something in the mist, and that a young man who was with him was dragged away by it. However, most people think he's delusional. Gradually, the mist engulfs the entire area. Without warning, a massive earthquake shakes the town, terrifying everyone. People are hesitant to leave the store due to fear. Amidst the chaos, a woman steps forward, revealing that she left her young children alone at home. She's worried because her kids are too young to be left unsupervised for long. She pleads for help, but no one offers to assist her. Determined, she decides to walk into the mist alone. After she leaves, no one sees her again. As the group tries to calm themselves and assess the situation, they start to get acquainted with each other. While looking for something for his son to lie down on, David is directed by a store employee to the storage room. Once inside, he notices the generator emitting a lot of smoke. Concerned, David decides to turn it off before it breaks down completely. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound. He quickly informs the others at the store, but no one believes him. However, they decide to upgrade the generator and head outside, as staying here doesn't seem safe. Despite David's warnings, people ignore him. David keeps insisting, but someone in the store scolds him. Ignoring David's advice, a young worker at the store decides to prove his bravery by opening the door. However, at that moment, a tentacle from outside grabs the young man by his leg. Despite efforts to save him, they fail, and the young man dies. They manage to push the creature outside and cut off a piece of its tentacle. The group debates whether to inform the others about the incident, as they believe the store isn't safe. Eventually, they show the severed tentacle, convincing everyone. David advises covering all the store's glass windows with whatever they can find. Meanwhile, Carmody, a woman with blind faith in her religion, starts preaching that this is Judgment Day and the creatures were sent by God as punishment. Her words instill fear in everyone, prompting Amanda, a teacher, to slap her to silence her. Ben remains skeptical. He decides to leave the store with a group, hoping to escape. Despite David's plea to stay, Ben ignores him. Believing he could retrieve a shotgun from his car, another man decides to join Ben. To ensure his safety, they tie a rope around his waist, intending to pull him back if something happens. After venturing into the mist for a while, the rope is suddenly yanked forward at high speed. When the pulling stops, David reels the rope back into the store, only to find it soaked in blood. At the end of the rope is only the lower half of the man's body, horrifying everyone. Now convinced of the monsters outside, the group decides to illuminate the supermarket's perimeter using bulbs, believing light will deter the creatures. Unfortunately, the light attracts massive bugs, followed by larger predators. As the insects swarm the windows, they shatter, allowing the creatures to enter. In the ensuing chaos, some group members are killed, a girl is bitten on the neck by a creature and dies, and another person perishes in a fire. One creature attacks Mrs. Carmody but mysteriously spares her. She begins to believe she is special, and many others start to follow her. Meanwhile, a creature attacks Billy, but the store owner manages to shoot it, saving the boy. The next morning, under David's leadership, a small group decides to fetch medicine for the injured from the pharmacy across the street, believing survivors might be hiding there. Amanda and others try to dissuade them, but David entrusts Billy to Amanda. Believing they can reach the pharmacy without issues, they venture out, only to find it eerily silent. As they gather supplies, they discover the remains of Ben's group, killed and cocooned by giant spiders. The spiders use human bodies to incubate their eggs. While escaping, they encounter a giant spider at the door but manage to kill it. Some group members safely return to the store. Mrs. Carmody seizes the opportunity to deepen her followers' faith, promising them protection under her leadership. David reflects on the dying words of a soldier found in the pharmacy, who kept apologizing, revealing the military's involvement in the disaster. Seeking answers, David finds 2 soldiers who had committed suicide out of guilt, and a third soldier explains that a government experiment had opened a portal to another dimension, letting the creatures in. Upon learning this, Mrs. Carmody declares that the soldier must be sacrificed to appease the monsters. Before the group can banish her, one of them stabs her. Despite her pleas, they decide to throw her out. A giant lobster-like creature attacks and kills the soldier. Witnessing this horror, David's son, Billy, begs his father never to let the monsters take him. The next morning, David and his team decide to escape from the crazy people and leave the supermarket. While everyone else is asleep, they plan to sneak out through the front door. However, Mrs. Carmody watches their every move. She starts preaching about the gods again, claiming that to please them, a sacrifice is necessary. She identifies David as a monster and demands Billy as the offering. When Mrs. Carmody tries to take Billy for the sacrifice, David fights to protect his son. Meanwhile, her followers begin to surround the group. Before they can attack, the supermarket manager shoots Mrs. Carmody, scaring the others by brandishing the gun and threatening to shoot anyone who approaches. Taking advantage of this moment, the group escapes from the supermarket. Unfortunately, 2 members of their group die shortly after they get outside. In the end, only 5 people, including David, manage to survive and reach the vehicle. Before leaving, David retrieves the gun from the vehicle's front compartment. The group quietly drives toward David's house. However, upon arrival, David is devastated to find his wife already dead, tangled in a spider web. Overwhelmed with grief, he decides that the only way to survive is to escape the mist by leaving the town entirely. As they drive, they witness widespread destruction and come across a massive, 6-legged creature moving ahead of them. After driving for hours, they run out of fuel. Stranded in the mist, they hear a terrifying noise approaching the vehicle. David realizes there's no way out. Accepting the grim reality, he takes the gun, and everyone understands his intention. Instead of facing a gruesome death, they choose to end their suffering themselves. However, when David counts the remaining bullets, he realizes there's only enough for everyone but himself. With a heavy heart, he first shoots his son Billy, covering his eyes, and then kills the others in the vehicle. Now the lone survivor, David believes the approaching creatures will soon kill him as well. In despair, he steps out of the vehicle, screaming for the monsters to take him. But instead, the mist begins to lift. To his shock, he sees that the source of the sound was a military convoy arriving with tanks and soldiers. They begin exterminating the creatures and rescuing survivors. David then notices a truck carrying the people who had stayed in the supermarket, including the woman who had gone out earlier to save her children. Realizing he killed his son and the others for no reason, David breaks down, screaming in agony. The movie ends with his cries of despair. If you liked today's video, don't forget to comment below and subscribe us for future videos.